It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My next guest is Aidan Gillen. Aidan's an actor. Maybe you saw him on The Wire on HBO. He played Mayor Tommy Carcetti. He also starred on the original British version of Queer as Folk. Or if you're one of the millions of people watching Game of Thrones right now, you'll know him as Lord Petyr Baelish, a.k.a. Littlefinger. Even on a show like Game of Thrones, with its dozens of complex, messy, fascinating characters, Littlefinger stands out. Since the show's debut, Gillen's character has allied himself with maybe half of the cast, only to betray almost all of them. And after 7 seasons on TV's most violent show, nobody's killed him yet. When Aidan plays Littlefinger, it's really fun to watch. He's cunning, he's opaque, devious, but also sincere when it counts, and he has a code of a sort. In this scene from the show's 3rd season, he pretty much lays it all out.
Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder. Many who try to climb it fail, never get to try again. The fall breaks them. And some are given a chance to climb. They refuse. They cling to the realm, or the gods, or love, illusions. Only the ladder is real. The climb is all there is.
Aidan Gillen, welcome to Bullseye.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Who was that?
That is really intense. With the music and without the build-up of the rest of the scene. It really throws you into that.
It really freaked me out listening to that, I have to say.
Like it's almost like on set you were in a music video and you should have had a little earpiece with the playback of the bum bum ba-da-dum bum ba-da-dum bum.
Yeah, we didn't have that. I mean, it was interesting because we did that as part of a scene, and then I think we did it as a voiceover afterwards. I was saying not voiceover, but like an ADR looping session, and I remember quite vividly going in to do it and really kind of amping it up and hamming it up a little because I thought it could take it.
Yeah.
But there is a hip hop version of it out there. I mentioned that to you.
I feel like that scene is almost a sort of thesis for Littlefinger, your character on Game of Thrones. Like it was as though they had making the show for a few years, and they're like, okay, let's have him lay it out.
Let's have him say what he's all about. Yeah, it's funny, that speech or a version of that's cropped up as a scene in season 1 that we never shot. There was a lot of stuff around the time, in the first year we were working on this show, where before the dynamic was fully kind of sorted, we ended up with episodes that were shorter, or that we thought were going to be shorter than we needed. So suddenly there's these extra scenes being written and you come in to shoot them. And that was part of a scene that was down to be shot, like at the end of the first season, but we never shot it. So it was in my head, and I knew that the writers had come up with this thing, which was a kind of Littlefinger mandate, if you like. And, it was in my head, but it was a couple of years later that it came up as part of that scene.
It's funny because Littlefinger is a character who almost always has his cards incredibly close to the vest, like a character who betrays very little to others, who's very closed. And so it is in this moment when he is talking to another character on the show who's also kind of a grand conspirator.
Yeah, it was okay to reveal, to make this statement to him because he knows what I'm about, It's one of those things, you look for these pins, if you like, to just hang your character on, or to define your character. And when something like that comes along, if you recognize that that could be such a strong indicator of who this person is, you really make sure, you want to make sure that it's actually something that does get shot, and that you really point it up and make it noticeable, because it could have been played in any way.
It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My guest Aidan Gillen stars on HBO's Game of Thrones. He was also in The Wire and the original Queer as Folk. I want to play a clip from the 3rd episode on the new season of Game of Thrones. So, spoilers if you haven't seen it yet. In this scene, you're talking with Sansa Stark, who is now ruling the North and Winterfell in the absence of her brother, or half-brother, Jon Snow. Let's take a listen.
Command suits you. The Northerners are all facing north, worried about the threat from beyond the wall.
So they should be.
I know Cersei better than anyone here. If you turn your back on her...
You don't know Cersei better than anyone here.
I only meant to say...
That the woman who murdered my mother, father, and brother is dangerous. Thank you for your wise counsel.
One of two things will happen. Either the dead will defeat the living, in which case all our troubles come to an end, or life will win out.
And what then? Don't fight in the north or the south. Fight every battle, everywhere, always, in your mind. Everyone is your enemy. Everyone is your friend. Every possible series of events is happening all at once. Live that way, and nothing will surprise you. Everything that happens will be something that you've seen before.
I feel like one of the interesting things about Littlefinger as a character is that, you know, the show is about all these people striving, right? Every single person, whether they're already royalty or not, they're all striving and pushing. And Littlefinger's character shares that incredible ambition. Like, this is a guy who is a striver and a pusher, but I kind of don't feel like he's a guy who wants to be on top. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, you're kind of right. I mean, he says he does, and towards the end of the last season, I made a declaration that that was what I wanted. So that's what he says, but, you know, he's saying that to somebody else to make her think that that's what he wants. Being in the position of absolute power is not really the ideal place to be. It's too dangerous and not as much fun, and you know, but being close to it or being in control of it, of somebody else who sits there, exercising influence over them while being at a safe remove is probably more what he's about.
When you were a teenage actor yourself, did you know that not all actors who are good as teenagers become actors who are good as adults?
I didn't know much about anything.
How did you start doing it?
Yeah, I fell into that by chance. You know the way always when you ask actors why they became actors, they go, oh, well, you know, girls and parties or boys and parties, and, you know, I just wanted to hang out and have fun. Well, that.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to live quite close to this youth theatre company, which was on the go in Dublin in the city. You know, I grew up in the middle of, practically in town, you know, in Dublin, and there was this building where a mate of mine he was signed up there because his mother was trying to stop him robbing, you know, shoplifting. There was a mate of mine whose pockets were always sewn up and this kind of stuff, you know. And
wait, literally?
Yeah, his mother had to sew his pockets shut, stop him stealing, and out of the shops, you know. So somehow or other he was channeled into this. This will sort him out, you know, and.
Some real tough love.
I don't know. You know, I've met quite a lot of actors who, you know, were pushed that way to get them out of a life of crime.
Send him to be in Oklahoma.
And you know, a lot of actors would say, well, you know, if I wasn't doing this, I'd be in jail. But he went in there, and I was like, well, where's he going? I think I followed him up there once to see what he was doing.
How old were you?
13. And I started hanging out at this place, but you had to be 14 to join, so I wasn't, you know, and you had to audition to join. So I just used to hang out there, and they had a pool table, and I started painting sets. The guy who was there was a guy who lived in the building, like caretaker, who was also one of the directors of this joint, and he used to have us out, you know, going on these excursions around town, looking for old wood and stuff out of, you know, skips, dumpsters. So we'd go on these excursions. I saw a good door down there. There's a bunch of planks over the other side of town, and you'd have these like teenagers going across town and getting all these planks and carrying them across, and then we'd build sets out of them. And, you know, so I was into the carpentry and the paint, and he always had, like, it was all this paint, and, you know, I really liked the smell of paint and glue and petrol and all these kind of things. So there was a lot of that going on there. You know, they talk about the smell of the being attracted by the smell of the grease paint and the roar of the crowd. But in my case, it was like, silk vinyl emulsion or, paraffin.
There's something so exciting about the idea when you're that age that you could just make a really big thing. Like, that's one exciting thing about building sets. Physically, like, there's nothing else you get, even if you get to make stuff, you don't get to make a giant thing.
A giant thing that people then inhabit and pretending to be other people, and it's this other world, So I was quite seduced by that, and I started playing small parts, but, really small parts. I think, after a couple of years, they gave me a line, But this was my life, I hung out in this place all the time. When I wasn't at school, there was, everyone went there on the Saturday. That's when you're supposed to go there. But I was there like every day because it was just down the street. And, I didn't really, my friends from school, I didn't really let them know I was doing this thing, because it was, not that I was embarrassed. It was just another different, separate world,
You're listening to Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My guest is Aidan Gillen. He plays Lord Petyr Baelish on HBO's Game of Thrones. Its 7th season just kicked off. I want to play a scene from a British television show that you were in, Queer as Folk, which later was made into an American show, remade for Showtime, I think, here in the United States. But this is the original show. It's about 3 gay men who are living in Manchester, in England. And this scene, which is one of the most famous from the series, you're already smiling because you know exactly.
I don't know what it's going to be.
You have a very conspiratorial smile, Aidan. I don't know if you know that.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, sure, why not? You're welcome. In this scene, your character, whose name is Stuart, is standing in the living room with his whole family arrayed before him, including little kids, and he's about to come out.
Stuart, come give me a hand with these shells, will you?
I can't.
Of course you can. I just need a hand. Come on.
We don't do hammers and nails or saws. We do joints and screws, but that's different.
Who does?
Queers.
Well, I go get some sandwiches. This kitchen really needs sorting out.
Because I'm queer. I'm gay. I'm homosexual. I'm a puff. I'm a pufter. I'm a ponce. I'm a bum boy, baddie boy, backside artist, bugger. I'm bent. I am that arse bandit. I lift those shirts.
Hey, you left out a lot of that scene.
Yeah, it goes on. It's pretty
raw. It gets
raw.
better than that. Come on. Why stop there? I mean, one of the things about that is that it's just this thing that goes on, and he describes all the different things he likes to do, I mean, that's a really good piece of writing. And you mentioned about the little kids being there, but the point of it is one of the kids is blackmailing him. My nephew is blackmailing me, that he's going to tell my parents, about what my life is. So he's, in a way, he's forced to come out. But given the way that character operates, he comes out in style.
Right beforehand, that kid is kind of pushing it.
Yeah.
Kind of trying to suggest watch out because I know and I could say.
Yeah.
It must have been a joy to do that scene. I mean, what a great opportunity.
It was, and it was one of those ones. I mean, I can recognize good writing. A lot of us can, but I really do. I know there's no point in doing something unless it's really well written. And in that case of that scene, I thought, well, all I've got to do here is just stand against the wall and just say these words, and not make too much of a. Not really get into histrionics. Just stand flat against the wall and just say this stuff because it's all in the words, And I did enjoy that scene, and I enjoyed playing that role. And at the time, we weren't really sure how this is going to go down. Am I going to get beaten up in the street? Am I going to get punched in the face? I just wasn't sure what level of homophobic reaction I was going to endure. But as it turned out, it was pretty much none. And that series was a big success, and it was groundbreaking. But it was so well written that it was about these guys. Yeah, it was about primarily these 3 gay men, one of whom was 15, so he wasn't a man, he was a boy, and their families and the worlds around them. But it was so panoramic, and it was about the city of Manchester. And while what these guys were up to was a big part of it. It wasn't, I don't think sexuality is the ultimate definition of who a person is. The writer Russell was just writing about his world, and but his world is also Doctor Who. So he went on and then reinvigorated the whole Doctor Who franchise after that. As a result of his passion for Doctor Who, I got to drive the actual K9 around my apartment in Manchester in a party scene, which was pretty awesome.
It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. In the studio with me, the actor Aidan Gillen. He's been in The Dark Knight Rises, TV shows like Game of Thrones and The Wire, and more. I have to say that as much as I love Game of Thrones, the show that you're best known for right now, and as much as I love your character Littlefinger on Game of Thrones, there's a part of me that, honestly, as I've talked to you, has felt like, why is Mayor Carcetti from The Wire doing this weird accent?
Oh, yeah.
You played this character, Mayor Carcetti, on maybe the best television show ever. And you got it because someone, am I correct in having heard that you were in a Pinter play on Broadway?
Yeah.
With Patrick Stewart and
Kyle
MacLachlan. And someone saw you in the play and thought, this Irish guy in this Pinter play is suitable for my gritty urban drama set on the streets of Baltimore?
Yeah, I mean, Carcetti, the character, right? The character I was playing in that Pinter play was a British character, so I don't know that they necessarily knew I was Irish, although I had the week before done a profile in the New York Times, which explicitly, did say that I was Irish. But, if you went to see the play, you wouldn't necessarily know that, because I was playing this Cockney guy in a play that was written in 1958 and set not long after that,
So you were doing sort of a Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins
I wasn't
voice.
doing Dick Van Dyke. I based my look on a photography book called The Teds, which was a book that somebody had catalogued teddy boys and teddy boy culture in Britain from the 50s
kind of
onwards.
Edwardian revival,
Edwardian
rock and roll
rockabilly
culture.
Yeah. So I got the look from that, and I got the voice from a documentary called We Are the Lambeth Boys, which was part of the free cinema movement. The directors like Carol Rice, who went on to direct a lot of great features. Anyway, blah blah blah. Bob Colesbury, who was a producer on The Wire, and a quite active one. He also acted in The Wire, but he was not just a money man or anything. He was involved in a lot of artistic decisions, like bringing cinematographers in, or actors, or editorial decisions. He worked with Martin Scorsese and Alan Parker. He was a really good guy. He saw the show and called me to a meeting down in New York, and we went and had breakfast, and he told us about this character they were thinking of bringing in, this politician, and they weren't really sure how it would go or how long he would stay in the show, but they were going to use this strand to reflect what was going on politically in the city of Baltimore and in the state of Maryland, but primarily in the city and the local political scene.
There is. I heard talk from people that I know from Maryland that your character was loosely based on a mayor of Baltimore. It reminded me. I in high school worked in the mayor's office in San Francisco when Willie Brown was the mayor. It didn't remind me of Willie Brown, but Gavin Newsom, who's now the lieutenant governor of California, reminded me a bit of it. In that it is this, that character is this combination of, feels like this character, this combination of sincere idealism and the scheming that is required of a politician. That it is this odd mix of those things that is, in many ways, what it is to be, especially at the city level, and especially at politically progressive politician, that there is this kind of scheming and horse trading and weird shadiness that mixes with this grand Rainbow Coalition grandness. And that must have been an exciting thing to play.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that character did change somewhat. I don't believe he did start off super idealistic. I think there was a shade of that came in, halfway through, and as it went on, there was a level of some kind of dissatisfaction or cynicism crept in when he realized, the higher he got, the less he could actually do, or, your hands are tied to a degree. And yeah, you're right, it does take a certain type of person to be a politician and at city level, but this guy wanted to go further. I remember having an actual chill when I talked to David Simon about this first on the phone, and he said, well, look, by the way, of course there was a lot of talk that this was based on Martin O'Malley. It's not based exclusively on Martin O'Malley. Of course, Martin O'Malley is one of the people who this was based on, and it's plain to see that,
Right.
But it's actually an amalgamation of different characters that it's based on, and then it's also part fiction,
Do you do things differently on stage and on screen? I mean, obviously on stage you have to talk loud enough the audience can hear you. David Mamet will tell you that.
I've done a few Mamet plays, and the last one I did, he sent me a fax. He uses a fax.
That's great. Good work,
referred
David
to me
Mamet.
as his old friend. I was tickled by that. Apparently, Mamet has issued this statement that if he's going to fine people $25,000 if they have any kind of post-show discussion after his shows. Have you heard about this?
I did hear about that. I thought that was some really good David Mamet trolling.
Yeah, I don't agree with everything. I love Mamet's work. Like
Yeah.
in one year, I did a number of years ago. I did both American Buffalo and Glengarry Glen Ross on stage, and so I spent 8 months of that year in the world of Mamet. And I love his writing. I don't agree with everything he has to say about acting, and how it should really be stripped of emotion. I don't really agree with that.
Yeah, I've talked a lot about it on this show about his book about acting, which I think is called Truth and Lies,
Yeah.
which is both the best book about acting I've ever read, and I'm not sure I agree with 20% of it.
Yeah, I mean,
but it is a hoot.
And it's all interesting stuff, and I've read all the books he's written about acting and about filmmaking and all the rest of it, and there is some great stuff in there.
It was a lot of fun one way or the other.
But the first few shows I did, I was mumbling into my hand. I was very shy. My hair was long; it was kind of down over my face. I was hiding behind my coat, behind my hand. So it is different. Yeah, it's a different discipline. I do like to do them both. I've been back on stage recently, which was the first time in 7 or 8 years. It's nice to escape from one to the other. I've always had this thing where when I'm finished a role or whatever, that I like to say, okay, I'm going to try and forget about that forever, and I'm going to go off to this, maybe to another country, and try and get a different type of gig, which is, how I ended up spending a good bit of time here, actually, in 99, I think it was. After we did that show, Queer as Folk, and just as it was coming out, I just thought, I've got to get out of here. So I came to California and did this small indie psychological thriller called Buddy Boy out in a warehouse in Burbank. But they're different types of things, and you just kind of try and run from one to the other and hope that when you get back to wherever the place you left a year ago, that they'll have forgotten who you are, and that they'll give you another kind of role. I mean, and then when you get to a stage that people know who you are, it's a problem.
Aidan Gillen, thank you so much for talking to me on Bullseye. It was really great to get to meet you.
Yeah, same. Thanks.
Aidan Gillen. He's on Game of Thrones on HBO. We're a little under halfway through season 7 right now.